Scaling Innovation, Shared On-Demand, and Integrated Urban Mobility. And I would like to introduce our moderator, Callie Sinazal. She is a principal consultant at Rebel Group.
Yay! Hello, everyone. We are the last panel, but we are most certainly not the least. So, if y'all are hanging around somewhere else in the expo hall, I can suggest you come on down and join the conversation. If anything, to save us from having to shout over you. So, hello. As you mentioned, my name is Callie Sinazal. I work for Rebel Group. We specialize in payments and mobility. And I'm really excited to kick off our distinguished panel. I'm going to ask them to quickly introduce themselves, and we'll start here with James.
Hey everybody, my name is James Baldwin. I'm Senior Sales Manager for Brompton Bicycles. We are a manufacturer of folding bicycles out of the UK, going on 50 years now.
Hey there, I'm Chad Ballantyne. I'm the Transformation Executive at Spare. We're a software company that does demand response software, so microtransit and paratransit and all of the other demand response types of services in between there. Before that, I worked in the public sector for all of my career before then.
Hello, I'm Laura Kroll, Senior Policy Manager at Lyft, where I manage public policy for West Coast micromobility markets. And similarly, prior to Lyft, I was on the public sector side managing the Babel's Bike Share program in San Francisco.
And one of these things is not like the others. I'm elected. I'm the Metro Council President in the Portland Metro region. It's the only elected regional government in the country. So I represent all 1.7 million within the 24 cities and 3 counties.
Awesome. Thank you all for coming and joining us today. So, as the title of the panel says, Scaling Innovation, Shared On-Demand, and Integrated Urban Mobility. That is a lot of buzzwords. So let's get down to brass tacks. When we say innovation, what do we mean? I'd love to hear from all of you, but I'm going to start with Laura.
Thanks, Callie. So I think, again, innovation, what a buzzword. But for us at Lyft, I think we're really trying to think about, what ways can we use process, policy, and or technology to problem solve and create change. And obviously, as a tech company, we're going to be focusing more on that technology side and looking at through that kind of perspective, how can we change travel behavior towards more of these zero-emission vehicles? And for us, e-bikes have really been that kind of core innovation element. And I think for us, the best example of this is in the San Francisco Bay Area with the Babel's Bike Share program, where in 2023, we had our first public investment into the system, which brought e-bikes to the entire regional system. And in 2024, we saw a 30% increase in ridership, which is pretty remarkable. That's total ridership, not just people substituting your pedal bike trips for e-bike trips. And that continued into 2025. We've also seen a 30% year-over-year growth in 2025 as well. So to us, that's really showing that e-bikes, it's not just a spike in ridership for the change in product. It really is this adoption, right? This continual adoption. And I think e-bikes are really growing the pie for cycling, which is really exciting.
Awesome, thank you. Chad, you want to go next? What's innovation mean to you?
Yeah, I think so. One of the things that I think a lot of folks kind of get trapped is with innovation, you think it has to be something new and shiny and sparkly. But innovation can really be something that's been out there for a while, but something that finally actually has the tipping point and is actually starting to get used. That for us is a big deal. For example, we run the Metro Micro service here. It's a micro transit service for LA Metro with 8 zones. It had been running for a while, but we came in and put in a new app that was just a lot more intuitive, user-friendly. We saw record ridership. We saw record usage of people using the app to book. And an app is an app is an app, right? But in reality, it really was innovative because it actually had people starting to use the app rather than calling in. So 93% of people calling in, using the app instead of calling in. And 36% increase in ridership. So it was really the proof is in what people are actually, using. People, like we say, voting with their feet or voting with the app. I think that's real innovation. It doesn't have to be something amazing and exciting like AI, which I think we'll talk about a little bit later probably, because that is also pretty innovative. But innovation can also be just the things we know and that we've known for a while, but they're actually really finely working the way we want them to work, and they work well.
No, I love that when you're talking about grounding it in implementation, that innovation really connecting. I think both so far what you've talked about, innovation is really about what the outcomes are. Lynn, do you want to speak about what that means to you over in Portland?
Yeah, I think just throughout my career, I think innovation is having the curiosity to look at the upstream, knowing what outcomes you do want and you're not getting, right? And going back up, finding where that barrier is, that new thing that needs to be tied back together that was, broken, looking upstream and then figuring out, okay, so how do we fix that? And it may be an old technology, it may be a new technology, and then figuring out how to iterate and test whether that is actually going to get you to your outcomes that you have. It really is about trying to get better outcomes.
No, I love that. James?
Yeah, thank you. Brompton innovation is all about providing a solution for transportation, making things more accessible, easier to access. Introducing the idea of cycling is less of a chore and more of an add-on or feature of your day. Like I said, for 50 years, we've been really making this bicycle right here. It really hasn't changed a whole lot. We put different parts on it because we realized things were breaking, and so we modified it. But we also, in innovation, need to listen to what people are saying, what they want, reading in between the lines of how people use things. And for 50 years, we've been making this bike, but for about 20 years, people have been asking this bike to do more. So recently, we developed a larger tire version of it that is also electric, because not everyone wants to show up to work sweaty, or they're meeting after then riding up hills. So innovation for us is listening, providing a solution for people to access better transportation, and then modifying that over time depending on use.
Yeah.
Can I give a personal example?
Of course.
I'm married to an optics engineer who is into advanced research and development. I'm a civil engineer. I overbuild by 20%. That is the standard, right? Because if we don't, people could die. So everything is slightly overbuilt, and not that it necessarily always has to be, but it is. Whereas he tries to figure out the minimal amount of material, and that's the innovation that has to go into that product, or that piece that goes into that product, right? At the least cost. And so he's constantly creating prototypes in our house that don't work. And I've waited 5 years for chairs, right? So I could get the final product 12 years later.
When those chairs come, though.
Yeah, they're beautiful. But I think you have to understand the perspective that different folks are coming to the table in order to understand what innovation means to them, because it gets scary, right? It gets scary on different levels to different people. And that's where most of our fights occur.
Or, it's building consensus. So you really get to test your stakeholder management in those situations.
On the positive side, yes.
So getting back to what we're talking about in terms of outcomes, that seems a really strong component of innovation. It's not just concepts, it's not just big ideas, it's really about where the rubber meets the road and what we're translating, what we're seeing on the ground. And what we've seen, especially post-pandemic, is just how much those outcomes have varied. What we thought we were working towards, tear that playbook up, throw it out, because how people traveled, where they were going, how they were getting there has changed dramatically. Our social fabric really changed. And so how has your work really evolved in this new setting? What are the impacts you're seeing on travel behavior, and how are you engaging with that in the public realm, in planning, with policy? And Chad?
There's a lot there.
Yeah.
So I was also a planner as well, so that is also what I love a lot. But I think that I think that we need to kind of reshape it, how we're looking at how people travel, look at how they're accessing travel, especially when it comes to public transit. We have, for so many years, really just given people, We've planned, fixed route separately from rail, from microtransit. We've done that separately. And we've always kind of kept things in their own buckets, and we've never really looked at how people travel holistically. The first mile, last mile element of it as well. And so I think that that's really where the direction is going. I worked at Cap Metro before Spare in Austin, and that's the transit authority there. And we even decided to take in the city's bike share system because we really wanted to look like soup to nuts. How do people travel? We want to be the transportation provider. If it's not a car, we want to be that transportation provider and make it easy so that you can hop from this mode to this mode to this mode to this mode. And I think that that's a really big, important piece that we are really honing in on because, again, we have a bunch of apps, we have a bunch of these things. They're kind of disparate. They don't talk together. If you do fare collection, you take the bus, you use this app to plan it, you use this app to pay for a fare, you use this app to do your demand response, and that's really what we're trying to get past. So that's what a lot of our focus right now at Spare is looking at how we can do all of the demand response, real-time information, real-time fixed route, real-time rail, real-time fare payments, all of that in one place and easy, but also open APIs because we know we can't be everything. So linking to other software, I think that's important because we don't want also agencies to feel this vendor lock-in where it's like, well, once you've made this decision, that's the only software you can get. So really looking at, from that whole holistic approach, of just in general how people travel and the user experience from the customer's perspective, because we're always focused on how we build the systems from our side of things, but it's really the end user, and that's the most important piece.
Yeah, piggyback on that. Brompton is really dedicated to educating people that bicycle transportation is actually the healthiest, best way for transportation. We all know that if you are riding a bike, scooting, or walking to work, your levels of satisfaction with your work go up. Your stress levels go down. Sitting in a car before walking into your office isn't the best way to start your day. So Brompton is really focused on educating that customer. During the pandemic, as many of you know, cycling was one of the only sports that you could do safely. So we saw exponential growth in ridership. We've been able to hold on to the majority of that ridership. So we are, from 2019 to today, up about 50% in ridership. And that means that people are just showing up to work happier, healthier, more productive, and finding solutions.
Laura, Lynn?
Yeah, I'll maybe build off of Chad, what you were talking about in terms of bike share really offers a way to extend the transit systems that we have, especially in areas where, like LA, like the Bay, where you have really complex regional systems. I know in the Bay, about 47% of workers in San Francisco are commuting in from other counties. So that's just a huge strain on the transportation system as a whole. So, bike share, and we're lucky in the Bay that we have a regional system. So again, kind of what you were getting at, Chad, of like, you can now take bike share at your destination to your office in San Francisco after you get on a bus, but also at home, going from your home to the bus stop in Oakland or in San Jose. And so really thinking about how can we, again, think about our transit systems holistically, in what ways shared micromobility, personally owned vehicles that you can take on a bus, that's, I think, really crucial to, behavior change that maybe started during the pandemic. How do we continue that so that people aren't just returning to single occupancy vehicles?
I just had a really interesting conversation with our sister agency, our regional sister agency, TriMet, that runs our transit system, and they were asking about our 10-year measure to end chronic homelessness in the Portland region that is running through Metro, through us, and goes to the 3 counties to provide enough money to get folks off the street into temporary permanent supportive housing or to keep them housed. Make sure they don't fall into homelessness. So we've served 7,000 people moving off the street in 5 years, and 22,000 people have been kept in their home and not gone into homelessness, but yet we still have a huge homelessness situation. So my world has gone from transportation, waste management, fun stuff, to this really hard, complex
Waste
issue.
management is fun. All right.
Yeah.
Next topic of co-motion.
Again, a
guys.
civil engineer. Like, this is exciting. Regulating the whole system. So there's obviously a safety perception, real and perceived, coming out of COVID with the mixed with the homeless situation. And TriMet was told by our largest county, we recognize that you are literally our largest shelter, but wouldn't provide them any money. So they were coming to us to ask if there was any way to be part of that system, because they have built up a team within TriMet to make sure that these folks know how to access the services and help them do that, to make sure that they're okay. Give them water, give them food, right? There's a whole new system built up inside the transit agency that wasn't there before in order to be empathetic, but also like the rest of the economy has to keep moving along, and we are in that tension right now. So that's the first thing I would say in the public policy space is this tension that's going on. How do we bring that safety back to an open system? And the second one is just related to land use and transportation, is that as we look into the future, we all knew we were building out multi-centric regions, but now we're building them out in spades, right? There's more of that going on. And so connecting these centers within our regions is going to be different than just hub and spoke. So I think we need to start thinking, what is the next iteration? We have a 50-year plan. We're already off of that by spades in building out brand new centers that are community-led, community-generated, right, that are actually looking to put people in charge of building out these places that will create generational wealth within a Latino community or the Black community or an Asian community. Like, we have 3 separate new districts that are all being built out that are culturally specific. And I think that's something that we need to start taking in mind, because they all have different transport needs that they want to talk about and that they need met. So I think those are the 2 big policy things we're dealing with right now.
I'm so glad you bring that up, because transportation does not operate in a vacuum, right? And I think that's something that you're talking about now, is that these modes do not operate independently. One mode unlocks another. So having access to bike share unlocks your ability to use transit. Being able to have access to on-demand services unlocks then your ability to get to work, to get to services, to stay in community. Having close proximity or even having housing, a place to go, means that maybe you can apply for jobs and have be able to pay for transit to get there. So these are things that all interact with one another and really operate independently. So because of that, I think a lot of your work also interacts with one another. And just like that, public and private side need to really come together, I think, and find ways, because I think we're working on, I would say, not even 2 sides, but 2 of the many sides of this issue. So can you give me some examples maybe from the group of maybe how we can how both public sector and private sector can partner to help accelerate innovation, but still maybe balance these other priorities, other competing priorities, limited resources, things like that. I know, Lynn, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, but I'm going to give an example that's not transportation related, that's waste related, because I think it's important in the transportation space, but this example is in the waste space. Metro oversees the entire waste system, but we also have 2 transfer stations where the regional waste comes to, it's compacted, and then it goes to the landfill. There are also about 8 small transfer stations owned by small companies within the Portland region, and we're in competition with them. And we can dictate, as the public agency, where the tons of waste will go. So we were in direct competition with them. So innovation was not happening within either space. So what we've done as the Metro Council is started pulling back and pulling ourselves out of direct competition and started putting ourselves in where the public need is, and the public need is in the place where the private sector cannot make money. right? So it's in recycling. Because there's a real problem with the recycling system right now. So we're looking at the resale of waste, we're looking at the reuse, we're looking at how do we help with the recycling stream. And I think that is also a part of the transportation juggernaut, is how do you integrate these systems while one is a controlling interest, because they're the public sector. So I think there's a lot of partnerships that could be made better if some of these regulations were relaxed, right? And we were outcomes focused and not who gets to control the decision.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And I'm going to maybe turn to Chad on this too, because I think the DART example is very interesting, what you were talking about before, again, about bringing them in, but then also in a way taking a step back instead of becoming an operator, thinking more of this like mobility management, right? I think it's more what you're thinking in terms of that you don't need to hold everything so tightly, but you do need to set up the system in such a way that it interacts, it operates, it's interoperable. So I don't know, Chad, what do you think coming from, both the public side and on the private side?
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, when you're in the public sector and you're at a transit agency, you just don't have the flexibility. You can't innovate, you can't do a lot of things, you can't act quickly. And so I think that what we see is this sort of partnership on the private side has been incredibly helpful. So for DART, for example, they've got, we run their software for their microtransit system. It's thousands of trips a day. They can't schedule drivers for every one of those shifts, right? I mean, it's just impossible. You've got peaks and you've got valleys in your demand. And so what we were able to do is pull in, Uber, Lyft, and other service providers. And we can turn them on, turn them off, allow them to innovate, allow them to come in, help cover those peaks and valleys. And then also as demand shifts, as demand changes, we have a lot of flexibility, in the platform. We can even, if we've got some DBE requirements, we can bring in some mom and pop location providers, that kind of thing. Incredibly flexible. And so I think by allowing the public-private partnership, it allows us to work around some of those procurement hurdles that a lot of transit agencies have, because they can't just flip a switch on and off on a lot of different things. That's just not how procurement works in public sector. And so really being the partner that comes in and allows folks to have this sort of infrastructure to change how they provide service, how they model service, and change it on a whim as demands change, because it's demand response. I mean, that's in the name, is demand, and you can't predict demand necessarily all the time. And so that's definitely where we can come in, because we can kind of help cover those demands where they've got a lot more rules that they have to follow in the public sector.
James or Laura, either?
Yeah, I think building on Chad's example, in the shared micromobility space, we've sort of seen two sides to public-private partnerships. So on the scooter side, where it's more permit-based, less public ownership, shorter contracts, often a year. And then on the bike share side, often more public ownership, more public investment, and those longer, more stable contracts. And for us, I think we really like those public-private partnerships where there is a lot of ownership, because it allows for stability so that we can innovate, because we know that there's a contract for a longer period of time. But we also see that the cities are way more invested in making sure that the program is really tailored to their community. So the Capital Bike Share program in the DC area, the cities own the equipment. They also own the fare box, so they get to control pricing, developing their own low-income or income-qualified program. And that really, again, helps them to say, hey, what does my community need and how can I tailor this system to that, rather than the private sector just saying, this is what's standard across our other markets, and so we're just going to come in here and do a cookie cutter program. So that doesn't necessarily work for everyone, as we all know. So I think, again, this kind of balance of stability and ownership can work really well in the public-private partnerships.
Outcome-based contracts, I think, are really important in this space, because when I was at TriMet a while back, everybody was putting in the next bus displays, right? And there were actual vendors out there. But at TriMet, the staff decided they were going to go ahead and build the units themselves and then put them out. And 3 years later, we had next bus technology, and everybody had a phone. That's how fast the technology had changed. So the next bus signs were already out of date, right? And if you're going to get into what screw type to use within the box, like if you're getting down into the gnat's ass, you have just stopped all innovation, right? So getting to the outcomes is more important, again, than any of this. So the procurement being outcome-based is pretty damn important.
And I think building on that too, I know in the bike share world, a lot of the initial contracts for these programs were written like 10 years ago, and they're just now starting up for new procurements. So it's also a really interesting time now that sort of the whole thinking has changed about how we should be going about even writing a contract. I think will spur a lot of innovation.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to public policy shaping more ridership, it's simple. It's building more infrastructure for bicycles. There's the concept of a car-free downtown LA is pretty wild, right? I'm guessing most of the people in the audience here, you guys spent at least half an hour in traffic, maybe looking at your phone, maybe looking at your dash, maybe looking at your rearview mirror, questioning your position in life and how you got here. If we change how people look at cities and accepting the car as just something that is unavoidable, right? You gotta get in your car to go get milk. You gotta get in your car to go drop your kids off at school. You gotta get in your car to go to the airport, whatever it is. If we change that paradigm into bicycles, it can be very, very powerful. There's a couple organizations that do this. Ciclavia, if anybody is familiar, just had an event last month where they shut down downtown. They had over 75,000 people attend, and there were no cars in LA. It was an amazing experience. And when they do those events, they actually see an increase in the commerce for the local businesses. They see a decrease in the air pollution. Crime goes down. So really what Brompton wants, and I think what the majority of the bicycle industry wants, is more investment in infrastructure. Not only in laying down the pathways, the literal physical pathways, but also building pathways for people to purchase high quality bicycles that are safe for them to use. New York passed the legislation around UL certification. It was because there was a lot of bicycles that were unsafe, that were creating unsafe environments for people. The certification of UL forced those brands to either exit the market or provide something that was safe. On the consumer side, there was a lot of incentivization around buying an e-bike. If you got an e-bike, depending on your income level, you got a certain rebate back. Though when they did that last one in Los Angeles, it sold out. All the vouchers for e-bikes were gone within 4 hours of launch. So we do know that there's a ton of demand out there. I think back to, Cash for Clunkers and, Obama's program, how many new cars entered the world when they did that. Doing something similar to that with bicycles would encourage people to go buy a high quality bicycle that they're going more likely to use. And the more people that are on bicycles, the more people will view bicycles as a viable transportation.
And I think it's not just bicycles. I think I 100%
Scooters,
agree. It's the infrastructure.
Walking, yeah.
I think, the all ages, all abilities type of, that connects people to transit. That connects people to everything but the car. Yeah, I think that we learned during COVID that, when streets were quiet and some cities started playing with, like Austin, Texas is where I'm from, and we started closing lanes and making them bike lanes, and it was great, and they've stuck and they've stayed, and it hasn't created traffic Armageddon. And now we have a ton more folks, and it's just the proof is there that you build it, and people are now they're flooding the bicycle lanes as well. And so it's, I think, just that infrastructure and giving people alternatives. I don't think everyone wants to drive. Fine, sure, people can drive, but I think that we need to give more options for folks who don't want to drive, because we see, especially the younger generation, they don't want to. They're not into it.
And I think too, building on the e-bike rebate program, when I was on the public sector side, e-bike rebate programs really offered this like midpoint between, maybe you don't have a high enough density of a city for a bike share or scooter share program to really work, but you still have that sort of latent demand. And the e-bike rebate programs can really offer that well.
The bike agrees with you.
See you later.
One of the things that we did when I was running the Washington Department of Transportation in terms of innovation was just changing perspective. We used to put out the most congested corridors within the state report, so whatever demand was higher than capacity, right? We changed that to the capacity corridor analysis, and we looked at all of the modes within the corridor and what their capacity was. And when you add up all the buses and the light rail and the bike lanes and all of the other modes, you actually have unused capacity. Instead of looking at it as just vehicle lanes, we made it capacity of the entire corridor. And that is part of the upstream problem that you have to fix in policy, is when you have a standard that then defines everything after it, right? And that's where the investment goes. So you have to change the perspective.
I think it's fascinating when you think about the shift that we've seen from in the state of California to moving from looking at level of service, just like vehicle throughput, that getting faster is better, and moving that to vehicle miles traveled and moving
And a reduction of it.
exactly. And thinking about then thinking about also not even just like level of service for vehicles, but pedestrians too, bicycles for transit. Thinking about moving from just making like headway adherence to just maybe like how many on-time performance, and the way we've been shifting our metrics to better reflect, I think, going back to what was earlier said, how people are actually moving and how people are actually using the system. Lynn, you made an interesting comment earlier that I kind of want to go back to about how stepping back from competition. Well, the competition was actually hindering innovation. And I found that a really interesting comment that I'd love to have our private sector respond to, because I think it's a fascinating way, in ways that maybe collaboration is perhaps more of the pathway forward. Anyone want to take a
I can start. I think one way, and this is maybe straddling my public and private sector experience here, thinking about competition on the bike share side, obviously scooters, and how cities or in my previous case, regional agencies need to be thinking about that, both as competition and what are your goals, right? If your goals for your bike share program are based in, decreasing vehicle miles traveled, but maybe your scooter program has an equity focus. How can you make it so that your public tax dollars that you might be spending on one of the programs isn't sort of at a detriment of the other program? So again, thinking kind of holistically and really focusing on what your goals are with each program.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see where that competition could cannibalize innovation a little bit, especially when you're talking about a government entity with maybe more or less capital to invest in the infrastructure. We at Brompton, we actually like bike share. We think it's really positive. We actually do have bike share portals over in the EU and the UK, but looking at bike share from Brompton perspective that's like the gateway drug, right? That gets them in, gets the foot in the door of, hey, you know what? Maybe a bicycle is the best way to get that last 3 miles, to my destination or my last mile. And then maybe one day they think to themselves, I just don't want to touch that bike anymore. I want my own bike. I want to bring it up to my house and tuck it into bed. So yeah, we don't see that public sector competition stifling, but keep at it, keep investing, keep competing with us, please.
Yeah, as someone who owns both my own bicycle, not yet a Brompton, but we'll talk afterwards.
One day.
I know, I can dream. And also an avid Lyft bike user, is something that both of them really have their place in helping me get around for sure. In terms of, again, what we were talking about, stitching those journeys together, depending on where I'm going, what the weather's like, whether I'm going up a massive hill in San Francisco, it really, that can totally affect. And having both those options, both of them have really enabled me to, to continue using other modes and not driving. So I would love to know, skipping forward, thinking 5 years out, maybe what's one innovation, policy, or partnership that you think could really accelerate our goals around shared mobility? Like in LA CoMotion 2030, what are we going to be talking about? Lynn?
Affordability in the United States is a problem right now, of anything, right? And to us right now in the Metro Council, we are very laser focused on workforce development because we are not seeing those kind of family wage jobs that we need to see in order to not have the homelessness problem, to not have the affordability crisis. So we have a construction careers pathway program where we're trying to coordinate all of the public money within the entire region that goes into construction so that we can create a pathway for apprenticeship all the way into journeyman level, because you need the hours. And if you're not coordinating all of your public projects, then you're not growing that workforce. And we are really behind nationwide in growing the folks that actually need to build out these. And TriMet is actually putting a lot of money right now into building a specific workforce, and that is mechanics, not for diesel buses, but for electric and hydrogen, because they need that workforce. So they're starting to grow it as they enter into alternative fuels. So between all of these programs, we need more emphasis on growing the workforce of the transportation future and less on what I've seen in communities that are economically disadvantaged, kind of the typical heating and cooling system, community, education. We need more than that, right? We need to actually push this forward and start investing in that.
I think that's really interesting too, because getting back to your earlier point about thinking upstream, you're thinking upstream from, say, homelessness by thinking about jobs. And that's, again, very holistic and spot on with you. I can take a very bland response to this. I know that's not what you wanted, Callie, so I'm really sorry. I'm going to
Get off my pants. Of course, go ahead, Laura.
And I think, you really stole my thunder on this, Chad, earlier on really thinking about infrastructure. Again, it's not a cool or like snappy response, but I think we've all experienced how a standard bike lane doesn't really work anymore. You might have 3 different speed vehicles. You're like, pumping along on your, Bay Wheels pedal bike, and there's like a delivery electric scooter going by you. There's like a Lime scooter going by you. There's our infrastructure just can't really accommodate where almost like innovation has taken us. And so how do we, I think some of this is e-bikes have really accelerated that, I think, in many ways. Again, I think some points that we've all mentioned already of growing the pie, that now a lot more people are interested in using bikes, which is great, but how do we make sure that the infrastructure can accommodate that? Is it making a standard, instead of I don't remember what the standard bike lane is anymore, but
6 feet.
Thank you. 6 foot bike lane, maybe the standard is now 10, like how do we need to be thinking about that kind of like future element? And I know one cool thing that Lyft has done is using e-bike data to help plan infrastructure. So Jersey City, which is a member of the City Bike program, they have been using their e-bike data to help plan where their infrastructure should go. So the e-bikes have MDS data, which is breadcrumb data that can then be created into a route. So the route that a bike took. They can then use that to say, hey, here's the hotspots for where we should be planning infrastructure. So how can other cities be thinking about how they can leverage that data to sort of be future-proofing future infrastructure?
I mean, I think, infrastructure, I think, is so important. I mean, and every time, I hear complaints of, people saying, oh, those dang scooters and, yelling about that, it makes me think, is this a scooter problem or is this an infrastructure problem? And I do think that infrastructure really, nobody complains about the cars that are driving too fast, as much. You hear about the scooters all the time. And so I think that is an infrastructure issue. I do think that's the future. I would say my take on this is AI is probably going to be where we're going to be talking a lot more. I think we're just at the very edge of it. I know we talk about it. I know it's really exhausting to even hear. Like, it annoys me to even say AI because I know we just talk about it incessantly. But it is something, it's more than ChatGPT. It's more than all of those kinds of things. It is truly revolutionizing how we operate, just within our software. I would say just within the last year, we have been pumping AI into all different corners and all different areas of that software, because when you've got all this transit data, you have all this data where, the breadcrumb data, all the data that we're getting, we have so much data that it's impossible to pull it all together. It's impossible to make any sense of it. And that's where AI is really making a huge difference in that. For example, in our system, if you're like a ADA paratransit, the demand response service, somebody calls in a complaint, the system will automatically look at the history of the trips, see if something went wrong. It'll go ahead and see, was there a breakdown that day? What happened? It'll summarize, here's what we think happened, and then here's an email that you can send to that client. Rather than currently what people have to do is research it, go see what happened. Did the driver do this, do that, do all this other stuff? It can pull all of these things together in a matter of seconds. And, obviously they can, take a look at what the results are. But I think AI is going to it's not going to replace people, but I think it's going to empower them to do better things instead of just like pulling up where the bus was driving that day and all the previous complaints, the boring stuff. It's going to take that off the plate. And I do think that we're going to see a lot of really cool things like that. And then it also, for future trips, it can go through and say, hey, I noticed Mrs. Smith usually rides with a wheelchair. She always has, but her trip for tomorrow does not have a wheelchair associated with it. You might want to check on that. And that's really cool stuff. So then somebody can go in and actually see these things before it becomes a problem, before we have to stop service, before then we have to, discipline a customer care agent for booking something incorrectly. Those are small examples, but, every use case we see there's so many opportunities to add AI and to increase, our usage of it. And also, looking at, historical trip patterns. Again, demand response, you don't know what your demand is from day to day, but now you can get really educated. If I can now start thinking about, was it a sunny day? Was it a rainy day? All of the different things that were happening. Is the president visiting that day? Or all of the different things, pulling that all together, and it allows you to, at least they give you that analysis and then you can act on it, rather than having folks trying to think, how are we going to plan the next 3 months of service? So I do think AI is going to be a big piece of it. And then I do think that is soon going to tie in with autonomous vehicles as well. We have now the software that can, manage all of these inputs, the trip data, all of those kinds of things, the microtransit stuff. We have autonomous vehicles. I think that is definitely where things are going. If you haven't been to Austin, you should come to Austin and see there's autonomous vehicles. I'd say like 50% of the vehicles in my neighborhood are autonomous. So you've got the robo taxis, you got the Waymos, you got the this, the that. There's tons of them. And so I do think that we are going to get to a place where we're going to have a lot more of that. And that's going to bring up a lot of questions, ethics. It's going to bring up equity. It's going to bring up a ton of different kinds of questions. And those we haven't really dug into as much. So that's where I think in 5 years what we're going to be talking about.
James?
I'm going to say the same thing. I honestly, when I see AI in my Apple News feed, I usually scroll right past it because I'm tired of reading about it. But really, it's the future of bicycles. If you ask anyone off the street that doesn't ride a bicycle to work why they don't ride a bicycle, the majority of them are going to tell you that it's not safe, right? And AI has the power to make bicycling safer, both through the protection that they offer. There's helmet technology that actually will track how close a car is getting to you, both from the side and the back, and alert you to it. It will also alert your family if you're in a crash. It can tell you the safest, easiest way to get to your work when president is visiting in town and it's raining after a big snowstorm. It can also inform these autonomous vehicles that, hey, this route is very, very popular with bicycles. You may want to choose a different route because those bicycles are going to either congest where you want to go, or it's just an agreement that, hey, this area is more for bicycles. And we're seeing that happen in cities. Portland has done that with auxiliary roads next to the main highways, right? So we've already seen that, and we think AI will probably encourage more safety and more ridership.
No. Go ahead.
Somebody's got to design the drone that sits behind me on my bike and says, bike.
Yeah, I mean, this thing folds in under 20 seconds and unfolds in under 20 seconds, and I'll do it for you in a second. But the future could also mean that this thing unfolds itself, and so you don't ever have to touch the bike at all. It just...
Which could make a huge difference for people who might have mobility issues, or maybe you're traveling with children or packages, and yeah, if you've got your panniers and it's a lot handling.
Everyone's been there when they're trying to grab all the groceries out of the car, also close their garage, also open their door, also, yell at the neighbor, whatever it is.
I can testify. I have one. I love it, but it's pink. My husband picked it out. I don't know why he picked pink. But I was just going to say, if the president does come to town, there will be more emergency naked bike rides and more people riding bikes.
We love to see it. I'd love to open it up to the audience if there are any questions for our esteemed panel. Any? Great. I'll come over to you.
In the meantime, are we raffling this away? Is that what's happening here? Or?
There'll be a race.
Okay.
It's at Ace.
I know bike share, at least in LA, is mostly publicly funded. So to be honest, a lot of it just comes down to economics and funding. And maybe not just this panel, but a lot of them. There's really no talk about pricing or business models, and especially with a Spare or a Lyft, and with maybe the free tech money era kind of running out, I think profitability and sustainability is probably a bigger focus. Is it just because, I guess this is me thinking out loud, but is it just, the people, the companies are sending, do you guys have chief financial officers and people that are doing the business model, and you guys are more the implementation and side, or is it that Commotion wants to focus more on, innovation and discussing the technology side? Because at least for us, a lot of it's not really innovation per se, it's just getting the money to work.
I think, I'm not the bike share person, but I did, when I was at Cap Metro in Austin, we did take, like I said, we brought the bike share in-house and made it part of public transit, because public transit's really good at not making money. And that is very, we've known that, that's not a secret. And that was one of the things that we thought, if we really wanted to do bike share right, we wanted to make it ubiquitous, we wanted to make it everywhere, we wanted to make it affordable. And so it is subsidized in Austin, Texas, but it's subsidized at a pretty low level. It's a pretty affordable way to get people to and from places. And so we see that is a trend across the country for transit agencies to start considering taking on some of these bike share systems, because again, with fixed route buses, $3 to $4 per person roughly for a subsidy. Paratransit can go up to $50 to $75 to $100 per person per trip. So, you're talking huge subsidies there, whereas the bike share is nothing near that. So, but yeah, I think it's worthwhile talking about sort of the cost benefit of that.
Yeah, and I guess I'll speak to Bay Wheel's program maybe a little bit more. Similarly, for a couple of public presentations, we did that analysis of what's the difference between a lot of the transit agencies, which my previous agency, MTC, was funding in terms of cost per ride versus the bike share investment. And it was, high, and bike share was super low in terms of cost per ride. I think the other piece is, financial sustainability for the longer term, which is a different element to be thinking about. If you want a low cost program, sure, do a scooter permit. But then it's potentially a here today, gone tomorrow, which is what you're trying to prevent against, say with Cap Metro. So again, what are those goals that we're trying to balance, and how do different programs hit them in different ways?
Awesome. Any other questions? Yeah.
Kind of just adding on to this topic. We don't personally have a problem with funding our bike share, right? Because we're not running it for profit. We're from the city of Long Beach. Ours is subsidized. We have a bike share for all that's $5 per person a year. It's $5 a year. You can ride the bike. 37% of our riders use that. So for us, it is about innovation, right? Like, so when we're looking at changing our program up, it's how do we make it even more bike share for all people using it versus trying to turn a profit. It is public transportation subsidized. A comment.
So are
rather than a
roads.
question.
So are roads.
Absolutely. Nick, yeah.
I just wanted to, I guess, dig a little bit deeper into the infrastructure. You had mentioned about it, that's really like so key to opening up the roads to people that are worried about safety. And I'm just wondering what tech companies can do to influence the infrastructure decisions. Maybe you can answer to this, Lynn, of the cities that they're trying to, just knowing that it's going to make people let their kids use it and they're going to feel more safe and it'll just make more people use the micromobility.
Yeah, I mean, there's very little we can do other than providing data. And I think data is really the proof that a lot of elected officials need to see. They need to see the data and see that in these locations, this has worked, and it's something that it's not a, you know, you're a elected official, so you understand that you have these, you know, you can't just make these willy-nilly decisions. And so I think the data is a really big piece that we can empower them with the data.
And I think building on that, I know when I was on the public sector side, we worked with third-party data platforms, so INRIX, Populous, Blue Systems, to ingest that bike share data. And one of the products that they had was effectively measuring, you could take, hey, we built this bike lane on this one section of this road. What was the basically bicycle travelers, like, what was the usage before and after? And so being able to make that case using the bike share data, I think, to your point, we can provide the data, we can provide that access. We can work with local advocacy groups, but in so many ways on the technology side, like, we don't necessarily have much more power than that, unfortunately.
You know, the car lobby is very powerful.
Yeah, I'll just say, yeah, the tech industry, although it's maybe not the biggest splash, but incentivizing employees to ride to work instead of driving to work is just one less car on the road. And then as that person is riding into work, they're obviously thinking about riding bicycles and how the technology that they're developing can benefit that experience. We work with a company called Ride Panda that offers those corporate benefits, and they've actually been able to see a lot of riders join.
There's a book called Great Streets, and I'm trying to remember the author's name, Elizabeth something. Maybe somebody will remember it out in the audience. She documents how street right-of-way over time has changed, and it's always been a conflict between modes. So in New York City, when they were building out their great boulevards, or in Paris, right, it was strollers against the buggies, horse and buggy, right? How do you allocate space? How do you have a clean place to walk? I mean, even going back to the Romans, right? So it's this controversy is not new to transportation of how to allocate limited right-of-way space. And it comes down to a prioritization. And right now in our world, the prioritization starts with the State Highway Department. And so the cities have been working very hard at NACTO, the National Association of Transportation Officials, to try and figure out how to get the data, how to show that when you reallocate space, you actually get more capacity, you move more people, not just more vehicles, you move more people. So I think all of this is just tied into the public policy discussion of who's at the table. And when we do our work, we make sure that the people who are actually using the system are saying what they need and then asking the engineers to then design for that. Not the engineers coming up with a problem statement on behalf of the community and then getting a completely different outcome. But it's a very tense discussion, but I think we've made a long way since I started at Wisconsin DOT many, many years ago. So I would just say that that's the public policy discussion, and it's been there for a very long time. Who gets what space? And then how safe is it when you do it that way?
Awesome. We have time for one more question, if there is one in the audience. Yep.
Another bike share question. I guess, so like, one of the challenges I feel like with bike share, at least in LA, is like the mindset towards it, right? It falls under LA Metro's traffic reduction, or traffic congestion reduction department. So like even from a basis, it's based around car ridership. So I guess related to bike share, you know, I could see that as one of the roadblocks is just getting people at the higher levels to even understand it, respect it, think about it, use it. And what, I guess I'm asking, like, what are some obstacles that I feel like you face, or like what are the kind of like the challenges that are really like holding back you kind of thriving in each of your systems?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, and this kind of gets at your point, James, on basically thinking upstream on if people are at least taking a bike in some part of their commute, they're thinking about it more. Because, yeah, I agree. I think, you know, getting public officials just on a bike can be a huge difference maker. I know we've tried to, you know, work with the local bicycle coalitions to do some of those elected official rides, whether it's just around, you know, bike to work day or bike to wherever day. But to start there and be like, hey, you can use a Bay Wheels bike, so that they're also then like, oh, this is an option that I can do on a regular basis. And then finding those champions and basically using all your political capital with them, because it really does make such a big difference to have those institutional champions, political champions, wherever it is, that can, that you can call and that they will help push the right buttons to get it done. Because it is really hard when you institutionally maybe are seeing that the location of a program isn't in the right place for people to be maybe thinking about it in a correct way. Yeah.
We have public policy bike rides once a year in the Portland metro region and outside the Portland metro region to be able to show the difference between the urban, the suburban, the exurban, the rural, and what the needs are in each of those different environments. And it is packed with elected officials. There's free food. They make it easy enough. There's electric bikes now, right, that are part of the conversation to get folks that have never done it or haven't done it in a long time out on the bike. The first one went over a mountain. That was not the best thing to start out. So we learned from there. But I would say the more of those events you can do, because mayors love to show off their cities. Any mayor will get on a bike. When I was running for office, I did a bike ride in every single city with every single mayor. That was what I did to get everybody talking and to get more coverage, and it works. It works. Every mayor wants to show off their city.
Yeah. I was just going to add, I know that we did a lot of launch events, like, you know, there were new e-bikes in each of the different cities, so we'd do a little launch event. And I remember when I was planning them, they felt so dumb in so many ways, because you're like, okay, we're getting catering, like maybe some news is going to show up, like the 10 people that are like most invested in this program are going to be there. But elected officials continually showed up, and it was surprising to then hear them like talk so like passionately about a program that you're like, the last time we were on a call, you did not care about this at all. But suddenly you're like talking about it in this way that I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah. I like this program too, you know? So I think, again, it seems so silly in so many ways, because you're just like, we're just doing this for a picture. Like, we're doing this for a picture. But I've been surprised at how much that really builds morale. And again, then all the elected officials are just excitedly talking to the other ones there about a program.
And I think I love how that kind of comes full circle to where we began and really like connecting things to outcomes. And like all the work we do is it really comes down to, are you getting people out? Are you getting them to travel differently? Are we making our cities a better place? So with that, thank you all for being an amazing panel and thank you all for joining us today.